Social Studies. Chapter 8. Parliament Stumbles Again. The Big Question. Why did the British government repeal the Townsend Act? Who is in charge? You might think Parliament would get the message. No taxation without representation. The colonists had drawn the line there, but the British government still needed money, and it needed to show who was boss. And so, in 1767, just 1 year after repealing the Stamp Act, Parliament tried again. This time as part of the Townsend Acts. It placed taxes on glass, paint, lead, paper, and a number of other goods that colonists imported. The British government taxed imported goods that the colonists needed. Vocabulary. Harbor. A part of a body of water that is next to land and provides a safe place for ships to anchor. Manufacturer. A person or company that makes or produces an item to be sold. This was Parliament's thinking. The colonists needed these goods, so when ships deliver them to colonial harbors, our officials will be there to collect the tax. Parliament made things worse by saying that whomever was arrested for not paying the tax would be tried without a jury. Taxation without representation, again, and this time trial without a jury. So much for the rights of Englishmen. Once again, the Sons of Liberty swung into action. They organized another boycott of all British goods. This boycott was as successful as the first one. The colonists didn't stop at making their own cloth. They also made their own paint, lead, glass, and paper. The quality of the homemade items was not as good as those purchased from Britain, and it may have cost more to make them, but the colonists would make do to get their point across. The boycott lasted for nearly 3 years. Once again, the colonists succeeded. British merchants and manufacturers lost so much money because of the boycott that they demanded that Parliament repeal the new taxes. It was one thing for the colonists to demand that Parliament repeal a tax. Parliament could ignore them if it wished, but Parliament could hardly ignore the powerful businessmen of their own country. So, in 1770, Parliament repealed all but one of the taxes. The British government kept the tax on tea as a symbol of their right to pass laws and tax the colonies. The colonists responded accordingly. They ended their boycott of all goods from Britain except for one. Can you guess which item they continued to boycott? Parliament had left the tax on tea to show that it had the right to tax the colonists. The colonists continued the boycott on tea to show that Parliament did not have the right to tax them. Each side was willing to leave it at that for the time being. The colonists, who were big tea drinkers, didn't give up tea completely. They simply bought their tea from Dutch merchants who smuggled it into the colonies. The Boston Massacre. Meanwhile, more British troops arrived in the colonies. The colonists grew alarmed. For them, the presence of British soldiers represented a threat to their freedom. The British said the soldiers were needed to defend the colonies against Native American attacks. If that were true, then why weren't the soldiers on the frontier, where the Native Americans were? Why were so many troops located in eastern cities like Philadelphia, New York, and Boston? In Boston, in particular, troops seemed to be everywhere. On the street corners, in front of buildings, in the parks. The citizens of Boston jeered at the soldiers. They made fun of them. They tried to make their lives miserable because British soldiers sometimes had regular jobs. Tensions grew over employment opportunities too. In several cities, fights broke out between colonists and soldiers. Those fights were not nearly as bad, though, as what happened in Boston on the evening of March 5th, 1770. There, a crowd of men and boys gathered around a lone British soldier on guard duty. They shouted insults and threw snowballs at him. Some of the snowballs had rocks inside of them. The frightened soldier called for help. More British soldiers arrived. The crowd grew larger. The shouts, the dares, and the insults grew louder and angrier. Then, for reasons that are unclear, the soldiers turned their guns on the angry crowd and shot. When the smoke cleared, 5 colonists lay dead or wounded. Their blood stained the snow-covered street. One of them was Crispus Attucks, who had once been enslaved and now worked as a sailor. Crispus Attucks was the first African American to die for the cause of American liberty. He was not the last. Vocabulary: massacre, the violent killing of defenseless people. Silversmith, a person who makes things out of silver. Engraving, a design or pattern that is cut into the surface of an object. A few days later, more than half the population of Boston turned out for a funeral march for the dead men. Shops were closed, church bells rang. Angry Bostonians called the killing a massacre, a needless killing of defenseless people. The event became known as the Boston Massacre. A Boston silversmith named Paul Revere made a copper engraving that showed soldiers firing on a group of perfectly peaceful, innocent citizens. Many paper copies can be printed from a single engraving. That is exactly what Revere did. No one knows for sure whether Revere actually saw the shooting. Some of the things shown in the engraving are not true, but Paul Revere was a son of liberty. He made that engraving because he wanted to make people angry at the British. Sure, the citizens who were shot had been asking for trouble, but they certainly did not deserve to die. The British soldiers who fired on the crowd were tried by a local court. It found 6 soldiers innocent and 2 guilty of manslaughter. The lawyer who defended them was John Adams.